What's going on, guys? It's Cimo. Just when we thought Burst of Destiny, the core set following Dawn of Majesty, couldn't get much better, we have the brand new Xiangjian Archetype that just got announced, and this archetype is very reminiscent of Zodiac to me in a lot of ways, because to Zodiac being one card Xyz, this archetype is one card synchros from what it seems, so that's kind of crazy. So let's go ahead and dive right into some of these new cards and see how good they really are. So first up is Mo Yi, the Xiangjian Swordmaster. It's a level 4 water worm effect, 1700 attack, 1800 defense, decent stat line just right out of the gate. You can only use the first and second effects of this once per turn each. For the first effect, if this card is normal or special summon, you can reveal one Xiangjian card or one worm monster in your hand. Special summon one Xiangjian token, worm tuner water, level 4, 0 attack and defense. While the token is on the field, you cannot special summon monsters from the extra deck except Synchro Monsters. It seems like this is here to prevent you from just having link spam capabilities, which makes sense because a lot of token producing cards have been abused for link monster purposes. And then the second effect says if this card is sent to the graveyard as synchro material, you can draw one card. That is actually really strong because not only does this set you up for a level 8 synchro play right out of the gate, but then if you sync with it, you actually get one of the resources back. You lose one because you're taking two cards and putting them into one from your extra deck, but then you're drawing a card, so you're actually breaking even on advantage in that exchange. That's actually really good. That's actually an insane card. Obviously, you're limited by the strength of the level 8 synchro pool, but a lot of the best synchros in the game are level 8, so that's not too bad. Let's go ahead and move on to the next card here. It is Taya, the Xiangjian Swordmaster. It's a level 4 wind worm effect monster, 1800 attack, 1500 defense. Again, the stats on these just base are actually pretty high. You can only use this card's aim first and second effects once per turn each. You can banish one Xiangjian card or one worm monster from your graveyard, special summon one Xiangjian token, which is again a worm tuner water level 4 0 attack and defense token. While the token is on the field, you cannot special summon monsters from the extra deck except Synchro Monsters. Okay, so it seems like that's going to be the clause anytime the token is out. And if this card is sent to the graveyard as synchro material, you can send one Xiangjian card or one worm monster from your deck to the graveyard. So we have to go through the rest of these. We haven't seen anything good to send off of this just quite yet, unless there's like a revival spell of sorts. But if there's any other worm monsters that you could possibly send for any other setup plays, then that could be pretty good. Not like an immediate just advantage card, but it could potentially set up for you to get advantage later on. Next up is Ryuen Longguan of Xiangjian Tactician. Level 6 fire worm effect monster, 1200 attack, 2300 defense. You can only use this card's first and second effects once per turn each. You can discard one other Xiangjian card or worm monster, special summon this card from your hand, then you can special summon one Xiangjian token, again, level 4 worm tuner water, 0 attack and defense, and while it's on the field, you can't special except for Synchro Monsters. If this card is sent to the graveyard as synchro material, you can inflict 1200 damage to your opponent. So this opens up a couple of things. First up, this is an extender because you're discarding another Xiangjian or worm monster to special summon this from your hand. So if your first play gets stopped up here, whether you go into one of these two, then the follow-up line could be to go into Ryuen here. So that's actually pretty good. But secondly, this is a level 6, and they always produce the same type of token, being a level 4 tuner. So this enables level 10 synchro plays, and while level 10 synchros may not be as abundant as level 8 synchros, there are some pretty good ones. I actually think they just released that brand new level 10 synchro in the Synchro Storm, whatever that side set was that I think got delayed for us TCG players, but it is already out in the OCG. I'm fairly certain that's generic, and that card's actually not too bad. Dealing the 1200 damage, I mean, that could be relevant if your opponent's low on life. I don't think it's that important, but it could be good if you're able to kind of spam a bunch of these out and deal a bunch of damage on the follow-up turn. Maybe that 1200 damage will allow you to clear the threshold. But the fact that this is an extender from its first effect, I think you'd probably still play this card anyway, because that just seems pretty good. And I imagine there's going to be possibly a level 10 in archetype synchro that we just haven't gotten to yet. Next up is Soken Zuiju Zunkin, or Chunjun, the Xiangjian Auspicious Beast, very long name. Level 6 earth worm effect monster, 2400 attack, 1800 defense. You can only use the first and third effects once per turn each on this one. So during the main phase quick effect, you contribute one monster, special summon this card from your hand. Okay, that's interesting. Second effect, before damage calculation, if your worm monster battles an opponent's monster special summon from the extra deck, you can destroy that opponent's monster and this card, okay? And then the third effect, if this card's sent to the graveyard as synchro material, you can target one card on the field or in either graveyard, banish it. So it does target, but it is banishing, which is pretty nice. This doesn't make you a token though, and so that's something that's a little bit bit, suboptimal from comparing to the rest of these cards in here. I do like you have this ability to quick effect tribute to special summon it from your hand. So let's say just hypothetically, you go into the first one here, the Xiangjian Swordmaster, and let's say if your opponent threatens this with something like a targeting effect, Chainlink 2, you can chain this, and then you can get rid of that to summon this, and then assuming the token still gets produced from the effect, then you can make a level 10 synchro play off of that. So there is an advantage to play this card, but I feel like it's a little bit situational, so I'm not actually sure that you would, just because you're wanting to make the tokens as much as possible because that's what's enabling the synchro play. So this seems like a bit of a conditional sort of defensive tool. It is technically an extender, but it's a very conditional one at that. But let's get into the good stuff. Here are the synchros, and look at the artwork on these. These are so sick. So first up is Soken Taishi Saikosho Chi Zhao, the Xiangjian Grand Swordmaster. That is a absolutely mouthful to say, but it's a level 8 Lightworm Synchro Effect monster, 2800 attack, 1000 defense, requires a tuner and a non-tuner worm monster. So it's not fully generic, but it is for the purposes of this archetype. You can only use one of this card's name first and second effects per turn, and only once that turn. Okay, so one or the other. If this card is Synchro Summon, you can add to your hand or banish one Xiangjian card from your deck. Okay, so that's pretty good that this also immediately generates you advantage. So that actually means that just normal summoning the first card here will generate you a plus, right? Because you're drawing the card off of the effect using this as synchro material, but then you can also add a card off of the first effect here. So that actually means that you go net positive in terms of advantage, getting you a +1 just for synchro summoning. That's not bad. That's pretty good. And then the second effect is a quick effect. You can banish one Xiangjian card or one worm monster from your hand or graveyard, then target one other effect monster on the field, negate its effects until the end of this turn. So this is nice because you're already going to have the setup just by synchro summoning into this. And while you don't have infinite material, because obviously you're using a token for this, you just have the one card that's going to be in there if you're going for the one card synchro play. It is an effect negation. It doesn't destroy the monster, it doesn't banish the monster, but it's still an effect negation, right? And that's still pretty decent because at least it's one way to disrupt your opponent. So not too bad. The fact it generates you advantage and can disrupt the opponent, that's pretty decent. Moving on along to our second synchro monster here, Soken Taiko Shui, which is Changying, the Xiangjian Grand Duke. Level 10 Water Worm Synchro Effect monster, 3000 attack and defense. This is a big boy, requires one tuner and one or more non-tuner monsters. So this is actually a generic level 10. Interesting. You can only use this card's third effect once per turn. So this gains 100 attack and defense for each banished card, and monsters your opponents control lose 100 attack for each banished card. So a bit of a Kagari Shizuku hybrid sort of effect going on here for each banished card. What's interesting is that it isn't for each Xiangjian card that's banished, it's just any card that's banished in general. So if you're playing something like Pot of Desires as an example, that means that immediately this is going to be 4,000 and your opponent's monsters are going to be down by 1,000. So that's an incentive for you to play Pot of Desires in this deck. So that's pretty cool. Second effect, if this card would be destroyed by card effect, you can banish one card from your graveyard instead. That's like a Thunder Dragon Colossus sort of effect. So it actually has protection. And then the third effect, remember this one is once per turn. If a card or cards becomes banished, you can banish one card from each your opponent's field and graveyard. Wow, that's actually really good because it doesn't target, it's not destruction, it's specifically banishing, and it just has to require a card becoming banished. So if this does get threatened to be destroyed by card effect, then you're actually able to banish something, which triggers the third effect, and then you can banish something from your opponent's field and graveyard. And I'm sure there's other ways we can trigger banishing effects as well to ensure that this can go off. So if you're able to just turn one go into both of these monsters, the Swordmaster and the Grand Duke, you have an effect negation, you have a thing that can't be destroyed by card effects, and if something becomes banished, you can then banish a card from your opponent's field or graveyard. That seems really good. Actually, now that I think about it, the second effect does banish a card, so that would actually trigger the Grand Duke. So they do work hand in hand together, negating an effect, then you can banish stuff on the field as well. That seems really good. All right, looking good so far. Let's move on to the spells. The Xiangjian Dragon Sword appears. Again, sick artwork on these cards. This is so cool. You can only use the first and second effects once per turn each. Add one Xiangjian monster from your deck to your hand, or if you control a synchro monster, you can add one worm monster instead. So that's pretty neat. It's already just a Rhoda, but the fact that you can then go to all worms in general if you already control a synchro monster is some nice flexibility. I love when they do effects like this that incentivize you to want to play extra cards just so you can get that extra value. And then the second effect, if this card is banished, you can target a Xiangjian or worm monster you control, increase or decrease its level by 1 until the end of this turn. So this is interesting because I guess this then allows you to go into other types of synchro monsters that aren't level 8 or level 10, right? That opens up the window for level 7, level 9, level 11, and that's a neat little thing you could do. Obviously, you need this card to get banished in order for you to do that, and you need to see if there's a level 7, 9, or 11 payoff that you would want to play, but the fact that it gives you the option to go into that is pretty interesting. But I mean, it's Rhoda for the archetype, so like you're going to play 3 of this anyway, so seems pretty good to me. Let's go ahead and move on to our next card, Xiangjian, the Grand Spiritual Peak. Again, loving the artwork on these cards. This is so cool. It's a normal spell. You can only use the first and second effects once per turn each. First effect, target a Xiangjian monster in your graveyard, special summon it. If you control a synchro monster, you can target a worm monster instead. Again, I love when you get this extra little bonus just for having something already out. I love when they do those types of effects, but it's Monster Reborn for the archetype. This is basically like your Adamancipator Signs, right? If you want to make that comparison. So you're probably going to play multiple copies of this, even though it is once per turn, but it's an extender. It's Monster Reborn. It's great. And it can get any of the Xiangjian monsters, which means you can get the synchros as well. And if you already have the synchro, you get the extra value. Second effect, if this card is banished, you can target a Xiangjian monster or worm monster you control, increase or decrease its level by 1 until the end of this turn. So what's cool is if you have multiple of these, and let's say you had to extend into the level 6 up here, the Tactician, then if you had the Rhoda as well as the Reborn, you could banish both of them and actually decrease his level down to go into the Synchro 8 if you wanted to. So that's a neat little thing. I guess that then widens the pool then even further to go into like Synchro 6s and 12s then as well. It does require a bit more higher investment to do that, but that's interesting that, again, you even have the option to kind of go into that pool at all. Moving on, though, looks like we have our first trap of the archetype, Xiangjian Research. Normal trap, you can use the first and second effects of this card once per turn each. First effect, target a face-up monster you control, banish up to 5 Xiangjian cards or worm monsters from your graveyard, and if you do, that target gains 300 attack for each. I mean, it's a battle trick, I guess, if you need to get the extra damage in. I don't think it's that. The only good thing about this is that it could also pump up the Grand Duke as well. And then if you target the Grand Duke, he's getting all the attack power there as well. I'm not really feeling this card. What's the second effect? If this card is banished, you can special summon a Xiangjian token, which is the Worm Water Tuner level 4, 0 attack and defense. So that's the same as the token that the monsters were making. And while this token is on the field, you can't special summon monsters from the extra deck except Synchro Monsters. So that's fascinating because you might want to play this just because this is something good for you to banish, because if it's banished, you actually get another token, and that allows you to extend even further. This actually gives you a good send off of our second monster here, because when he's used as synchro material, you can send a Xiangjian card from your deck to grave. So because you can send the trap, that would then possibly allow you to get another tuner out, and that way you can then go into another play depending on the type of hand that you have. Interesting. I don't really think you would play this for the first effect. I think if it comes up, it's neat, but I think you'd maybe play it for the second. Let's go ahead and see the other trap card here. It is Xiangjian Sudden Shift. It's a normal trap. You can only use the first and second effects once per turn each. Target a worm monster you control and 2 cards your opponent controls, destroy them. Well, that's Icarus attack, so like that's pretty good. Obviously, Icarus attack isn't as good now as it has been in the past, but we see cards like Solomon Great Rage and the like that have a similar effect and can be very devastating in the right circumstances. And so that's pretty neat. Also, does the Grand Duke allow you to protect it from being destroyed by that card? If this card would be destroyed by card effect, oh my god, it does. So there is a synergy there, which is pretty neat because you can actually protect this from being destroyed, and then I think you can pop 2 of your opponent's cards. So then it actually does become like Solomon Great Rage if that works the way I think it does. This is a much better trap than the first one. Second effect, if this card is banished, you can special summon a Xiangjian token. Oh, so it's actually just the same. So this is something I think you would actually consider playing, because not only do you have the potential token extender, you also have the fact that you can just pop your opponent's cards. So we know how powerful that popping cards can be, because just removing monsters on the field means your opponent can't link with them. They can't exceed with them. And in the instance of back row, you can do it during the end phase, and that way they're never going to get to use the cards that they set face down. Very, very fascinating archetype. Overall, I'm actually pretty impressed. I think there's some real potential here. Now, comparing this to the other Burst of Destiny archetype with the birds and the triple normal summoning and all that shenanigans, I think that archetype is much, much better just on the surface here, but I think there is a lot of potential here. This archetype seems very low investment. It reminds me of Zodiac with the 1-card sort of commitment plays and doesn't require a ton of resources for you to do so. Seems rather consistent because you have 3 Rhoda, you've got the main starters, you have the monster reborns, you have ways to extend through your opponent's interruption as well, and these guys are also quite large. Like, I mean, 2,800 on the first synchro and 3k on the second, that's 5,800. If you deal 1,200 damage from syncing with the level 6, that means you're at 7,000. You just need to find a way to get an extra 1,000 damage on field. That seems very realistic that you could OTK your opponent on the second turn with this deck. I think there's a lot of potential here. I'm not sure if it's going to be like as broken as the other archetype, but I think this is actually a very promising step in the right direction for an archetype that could actually see competitive play. These just seem very push. This archetype just seems to have a lot of potential to be competitively viable. I'm not 100% sure if it will. I think it's going to depend on the way the meta shapes up, but it's a low investment archetype. I think you have a lot of potential for splashability with other cards amongst the deck as well, because the engine seems rather compact. And so again, similar to Zodiac, I keep making a lot of comparisons here, but I feel like you can load the deck with other cards to kind of balance it out against whatever meta you might find yourself in, whether it's hand traps, whether it's other defensive cards. The archetype seems pretty solid, and I really can't wait to see what people do with it because it seems pretty decent. But guys, that's going to do it for me. Let me know down in the comments what you guys think about the Xiangjian Archetype, because I'm really curious to hear what you think. I think this one's pretty promising, and I don't really say that too often anymore, so I really can't wait to hear what you guys have to say down below. Thank you all so much for watching the video. Be sure to like the video as always. Subscribe to the channel for more amazing Yu-Gi-Oh content, and if you found this video informative, consider supporting me on Patreon for exclusive early one-day access to the Yu-Gi-Oh Progression Series, The History of Yu-Gi-Oh, and Sealed Showdown. Thanks so much again, and we will see you next time.